Welcome everyone to today's webinar on the Secure Treasury Payments Security Training. This is Brian from Strategic Treasurer, and we're pleased you could join us as we take a look at how Secure Treasury can help save your organization's money, data, and reputation. Our speaker for today is Craig Jeffrey, founder and managing partner of Strategic Treasurer. Welcome, Craig, and I'll now turn the presentation over to you.
Thank you, Brian. Thanks, everybody, for spending part of your early afternoon or late morning with us to talk about security training, payment security training in particular. Hopefully, many of you attend our CPE and CTP credited webinars. This is not one that falls into that category, but it's certainly important information. We have a product associated with it, and would love you to consider that. But we'll cover quite a bit of content, as you're probably used to on our site. So thanks for joining. Really appreciate it. I see engagement too in the chat box. So again, thanks for that. So let me begin by looking at the security landscape and how we think about providing protection, or how you probably think about protection as well. Payment fraud, different types of fraud occur because they're trying to probe and find weaknesses across a number of areas. So it could be hardware related, compromising a router to gain access to a system. It could be software related. Maybe security hasn't been set up properly, and so someone gains access to a system and can enact the changes that they want to. Or it could be coming through a person to gain control of their credentials or to get them to do something. So whether it's hardware, software, or the human element, all of those pieces are vital for protecting an organization. And so as you look around the circle with these protective spheres, payment security training sits at the top. That's really focused on the human element. That's much of what we're talking about today. Payment assessments are what every organization should do at least every 2 years, to look at the payment process. Where are the exposure points in the process, in the technology, with the people? Where are the files exposed? Where is the data exposed? How would someone compromise that? So having a look at a payment process through a payment assessment is vital. Whether you do that on your own, whether you use a firm like Strategic Treasurer, those are really, really important, especially given how critical fraud has been, how much success the criminals have had. Infrastructure security and technology, those are different ways of securing the organization. This includes things like how frequently are patches made, the strength of the firewall, some of the zero-day protections, making sure that nobody's trusted, or if there's trust granted, it's very carefully given. That's what your IT and your CISO, your Chief Information Security Officer, or CISO, often does. Many organizations, if you look at around 9 or 10 o'clock, you see general cybersecurity training. The vast majority of organizations have some type of cybersecurity training. Essentially, every bank does, and the majority of organizations do have general cybersecurity training, but it's not focused on payments and payment security. Certainly some things touch on it, but it's not narrow, focused, and concentrated in that manner. And that's what we see as a weakness in many organizations. And that's where Secure Treasury fits in to fill a significant gap and a significant threat. So you're on a webinar about payment security training and about fraud. You obviously think, or almost everybody must certainly think, that fraud is a big deal. All of your peers do, or the vast majority of your peers do. If you look at the top, 3/4 of companies experienced or suspected fraud over the past year. If you were to include things like phishing emails, I would say that there's not a company that hasn't experienced phishing emails every single month, let alone once a year. But when we talk about suspected fraud or fraud attempts with success, 3/4 of companies have experienced something in that time frame. That's what they reported. Well, what else are we seeing? What else are we seeing? Business email compromise, imposter fraud, this type of spoofing. That's nearly 4 out of 5 companies experienced that. They suffered some type of fraud attempt with maybe no success, with a loss, or multiple losses, maybe even someone was let go. And 2/3 are experiencing social engineering by phone, email, or text. And I would venture to guess, if we ask people to raise their hands, how many are concerned about some of the AI, like ChatGPT, the ability for people to craft better messages quickly, maybe even to use some combination of automation and AI to perform more effective social engineering, including voice. I think we're going to see a lot of hands go up. That's particularly troubling. We've gone from a time where people couldn't type, they didn't know English, and they would write terrible content trying to get you to give up information, and we all laughed. Then the messaging, the language got better and better, and now it's becoming extremely difficult to tell. But across the board, you can see even things like payment diversion, data theft, malware. 50% of companies are experiencing an issue. So what's important for effective payment security? You certainly have to have the right type of cyber security, cyber defenses from the firewall, from the software side. Permissions have to be granted in the system, so a criminal would have to either gain access to the data or control multiple IDs. But what are some of the human security components? Our view is that over the last 5 or 6 years, many companies have gone from ignoring the human element in cybersecurity to playing catch up. And general cybersecurity training, I think everyone who's involved in payments is starting to realize that is not sufficient. It's not looking at the payment side. So, this idea of training on the bottom side, training as an update, training as a service. How do we patch our systems, our firewalls, our antivirus software? Well, there's a regular patch sequence. That same type of patch sequence isn't digitally uploaded to people, but there needs to be training so that everyone's brought current. Dual controls and segregation of duties, I think we're well confirmed, or understanding that most people are. If we look up an out-of-band validation, you get a message to change a payment. You want to confirm that through a separate channel to make sure that just because one channel is compromised, that you don't then make payments out the door. And then certainly employee training and testing matters. Training is one thing, testing brings it home. I'll just give you a quick example on our systems we track, and it seems like many people try to take the tests without going through the courses, and then they fail. Usually the first course they fail, then they get a lot more serious and motor through the material. So testing helps emphasize the material. Just because you might know 50-60%, or most of your employees might know 56 or 60% of the content, you really want much better mastery of that. And so training specifically on payment security is a key and crucial activity if you want to protect payments. So who is responsible for payment security at your organization? Is that IT? Is it Treasury? Is it the Chief Executive Officer? And you can continue to see CISO, the Chief Information Security Officer, or other. So feel free to select all that apply if it's a shared responsibility, or if there's a particular responsibility. So this is payment security. Not all security, but payment security. Give everybody a chance to respond. Yeah, so we'll give away a little bit more time to respond there. So it's if you can't see the poll question, you can read the chat box to see ways to pop that up in the screen, perhaps resolve the issue. All right, so let's pull that up. We would. IT and Treasury, looks like a lot of overlap there. That makes a lot of sense. Organizations with CISO sometimes take that on. Our view is that Treasury is the superintendent of payments and is therefore the superintendent of payment security. Superintendent meaning is responsible on an overall basis, not responsible to do everything, just like a superintendent doesn't drive the school bus, make the lunch, teach all the classes. They're responsible for payment security, whereas, the corporate hardware and overall software posture is going to be the CISO or someone from IT. And of course, there's going to be some responsibilities at the CEO level to protect the organization. Very interesting. Happy to see that there's, Treasury is taking the lead in the responsibility category. So thanks for taking that poll question. Really appreciate it. So the idea of both training and testing, banks are farther ahead than companies. I can't make any excuses, but I can share a reason. Banks, essentially every bank provides security training, and they have testing. A heavy percentage of that testing, essentially 82% of them have a testing component, and more frequently seeing banks performing, more than just once a year training and testing. They're doing that at least semi-annual, or as new things come up, they're rolling that in. Corporates have been playing catch up. The majority have training, and now over half have testing to make sure that the content that's being shared is being understood and applied. So really, really interesting to see that where the corporates are now in the majority on the testing front. That's an encouragement to me, as it's been a long time coming to get there. So train, but verify via testing to butcher a different type of phrase that people like test but verify, but this would be test is verification. So what are the effects of technology progress? What's happening? This idea that tech is advancing quickly. We know that. We see that in our individual lives. We also see that in our corporate experience. But criminals are taking advantage of the tech too. They want to be more efficient. They probably have a session going on right now, how to avoid more intelligent humans when you've upgraded the human element of security. They want to find ways to get by that. Same thing on the tech side. So there's probably some, I'm sure there's not a webinar, but maybe there's something going on where there's training, but there's certainly sharing information. And why is the threat more significant? Well, technology is helping that. And because of that, crime is paying significantly, and that funds more and more attempts. So we've moved from it paying to paying significantly. We've moved from very unsophisticated attempts, like poorly written emails, to extremely sophisticated attempts that leverage, not only social media, but they leverage voice. Some of the voice activity that they use to provide verbal instructions is increasingly scary. They've gone from, it took criminals a lot of resources and people, to there's readily available tools that automate that. While it used to take a lot more, technical knowledge to create and have success on some types of fraud, there's things like, ransomware as a service, for example, where less skilled people technologically can also perform this type of crime and criminal activity. So fraud is evolving along with technology. So criminals are advancing on the attack. Our defenses have to improve as well. Awesome stuff. So that brings us to our second poll question. And this is a double stacked poll question, and we love to find out about this. So what have you found most challenging in implementing a payment security training program? That sort of assumes that you are, if not, but not applicable. It's convincing decision makers of need in addition to general cybersecurity training, like making a point of distinction. Isn't training, like cybersecurity training, payment security training. Is there a difference? Is it the time required? Is it the cost per user, the effort in doing that? Is it a delivery method or the effectiveness, finding content that's relevant and helpful? And then finally, does your cybersecurity training include formal, recurring payment-specific security training and testing? So if you have cybersecurity training, do you also have payment-specific security training, payment security training and testing? So that's the combination of both of those. So feel free to select one of the options under 2 and all that apply in option number 1. in the chat box. We're going to share the results with everybody, so we won't do the typical chatter, but we will put some information in there. Brian's going to post something from CTM file. I'll just give you a short plea or commercial, if you will. So in LinkedIn, you can follow CTM file on LinkedIn. Click on that, follow CTM file. There's some news there. We'll also put a post up there for ctmfile.com. I'd encourage you to subscribe. It provides you with a weekly newsletter. It's a media site that we acquired a couple of years ago. We're expanding its use and purpose. Would love for you to subscribe. It's just one email per week with a summary of some of the key news items and some helpful links and content. So please go ahead and subscribe just by clicking that, filling out the form on that particular site. It's distinct from Strategic Treasury. That would be quite delightful if a number of you would do that. It would make me very, very happy. That's the status of my life today. That makes me happy and delighted. And of course, you can see SecureTreasury.com as a site there. So thanks for popping up the results here. What are we finding? We're finding some good stuff here, convincing the decision makers we need something more than just general cybersecurity. That's a third. Slightly more is the time required. This is excellent. we can always share more information about how few hours it really requires to go through quite a bit of payment security training. The effectiveness, content that's relevant and helpful. Hopefully we can solve that issue. Delivery method and cost tend to be a little bit smaller. Very, very good information. Thanks for clicking that. That is certainly what we see in many, many companies. I love this, right? Does your cybersecurity training include formal, recurring payment-specific security training and testing? 44%. So I think this is a superior audience to the survey we had referred to. It's probably a little more concentrated. Those people are focused on payment security. So kudos to you. Excellent. So we'll continue on in our lunchtime sprint if you're on the East Coast, or pre-lunchtime discussion. So payment security training, what are we looking at here? SecureTreasury, we provide a cloud-based training course, and the purpose is to help people understand security principles, types of fraud, methods of attack, how those can be prevented, how you can use both principles and different types of defenses to protect your organization. So it's a way of keeping people up to date. We use an LMS where it captures the information, provides you reporting. And so within that, and you can see that if you go to SecureTreasury.com, if you look at what's included, there's the online training videos, there's reference notes where you can follow along and write those in as you're listening to solidify the content through a physical action. There's lesson quizzes, which is the testing component. We also provide transcripts. So if you're more of a reader than a listener video person, we've got you covered as well. And then it provides a reporting to the manager so they can see the results to make sure that the learning is taking hold. So it's focused on what you need. If you're in Treasury or if you're a payments professional and your organization needs this type of protection, and you have responsibility to that, this is something you want to take the lead on. If you don't have responsibility, you might want to make sure that they are aware of that. Sliding to this next picture, this image, security, control, and control principles, part 1 and part 2. That's just part of a screenshot. We have 12 security principles, which we use the, I guess it's the acrostic or acronym, secure clamps. The first S is speed matters. There's 12 different security principles. Principles are excellent in that they highlight some of these guiding elements that can work in lots of different situations. Certainly, there's going to be particular steps, desktop procedures that you have that protect a particular part of the organization. And those are vital as well. But when you're armed with some of the principles, that helps in a lot of different ways. So Speed matters. Speed matters. There's a number of elements there. One of them is if I can detect fraud very quickly, even if money has left my bank account, I might be able to alert the authorities to freeze funds before they leave the banking system. So speed matters even when bad things have happened. Don't just be embarrassed and ashamed. Act. So speed matters. What are we looking at here from this principle? Here's a few examples. So on the prevention side, do you provide and perform daily reconciliation, either in the form of a Treasury proof or an actual daily reconciliation, which might be very automated with data coming in? Examples might be, are these transactions legitimate? Do you have small debits and credits? Usually, we're probably pretty familiar with micro deposits to test to make sure an account works, to confirm that the setup is fine for legitimate activities. Well, criminals use that as well to find out which accounts may have exposure and not have some of the banking controls that your bankers tell you to put on those accounts. And then we tell you to make sure you're either blocking or performing daily reconciliation. Why would they send in a small debit and a small credit for the same amount or amounts? To tell if the account's open. If they just left one, it might result in someone saying, what's this balance for? But it's surprising how many companies just move past the issue and just go ahead and say, oh, that's fine. And then find out later that the day after Thanksgiving or on some other event that the account was raided because they found that the account wasn't controlled. That's one principle. There is a good opportunity to download a free ebook, Payment Security and Fraud Prevention. Go ahead and download. I don't know if you can click on the link on the screen because I'm displaying it, but you can see it. Brian has cleverly placed in the webinar chat. There's a short link. Download the Secure Clamps ebook. You click on it. It's free, and you can download it. If we see you at the AFP, we still have some copies of the real book that came to play, which is about the size of a little bit bigger than a wallet. So we also did print some. They're very small, fun to have, but the digital version is great. Encourage you to download that. That would also be a delight. And I think our marketing team would say that's a measure of success for doing this webinar. Measurements matter. So you help us. Okay. So what are some of the considerations when you look at training solution? So why look at Secure Treasury payment security training? You're going to hear me quite a bit. I do most of the training on the video. So maybe that's a good thing. Maybe it's a bad thing. You can decide. But first, it's not the same as cybersecurity training is not the same as payment specific training. And as the superintendent of payments and superintendent of payment securities, that needs to be done in your organization. So find a way to do it, whether or not you use Secure Treasury. Make sure you get payment specific training. All those employees and management authorized to make payments are targets for fraud, for being spoofed. One of the largest banks in the U.S., has a subscription process they use to provide Secure Treasury for their clients. And that's just one way to say it's people are seeing how valuable that is, and your bankers see how valuable training is, and it's worth getting training. And we find that most individuals can complete the training and testing for their set of courses in under 5 hours. You did all of it, it takes longer than that, of course, but that's one way to look at it. So now you're saying, what are some of the final thoughts? What do we need to look at? We've been rushing through a number of topics very, very briefly. So what are the effects of tech advances? Not all of them are good. There's a good side and a bad side. The fact that there's more tech, they're using it to mount an offense, a heavy offense, and it's increasingly sophisticated. And that requires a defense. So that's one. So know that. Second is specialized training matters. We know that for much of life, much of our business. And so proper security around payments and understanding the proper principles, the different attack methods is very, very important. And so training is a way to update people just like you update your firewall. And then the payment security principles, we talked about the 12 payment security principles using the acronym Secure Clamps. This is distinct from general cybersecurity, and knowing that people are the targets. How do we make sure people are the best prepared for defense? There's a couple of ways to do that. One is there's specific activities that people need to do for your system and your process. There's also security principles that are vital so that people are well trained to recognize new types of attacks or attacks that have slightly different characteristics, but fit into one of these patterns that the principles will help you address. So those are some of the final and key thoughts that we have for this activity. So with that, I'll turn it back over to Brian. We've got some opportunities to connect and would love to connect with anybody at the AFP. Invite you to download the Secure Clamps ebook, and Brian will also post some information about CTM files. So if you can, download that or sign up for the newsletter, it's at the top of the page. It says newsletter on CTM file. It would be a wonderful Friday for me. Thanks so much for taking some time during your lunch or during your late morning. All of us here at Strategic Treasury really appreciate your time and attention to this important matter. Thank you so much. Brian?
Indeed, thank you everyone for joining us today. A copy of today's webinar slides will be sent to you within 5 business days. If you'd like more information on Secure Treasury training course, Jill, whose contact information is on the slide, will be happy to help. And for more on payment security, be sure to download the free Secure Clamps ebook Craig mentioned earlier by clicking the link in the chat box. Thank you, and we hope you have a good rest of the day.